So yes, this morning I'm going to give you a sermon about worms. Wow, you're so excited. I love that. In honor of our stories about the earth this month. But this is why you come here, because we find the sacred not just in books. We find sources of the divine not just in our fellow humans, but we find revelation in the smallest of creatures, in the bodies that wiggle underneath our feet. Yes, the worm deserves our prayers and our welcome. Even if you find them really gross, they gross me out. Anybody else? You all seem so excited. Yes, a few people get grossed out by worms. They are a good reminder that not everything that is sacred is beautiful. Not like the pictures of the earth from Artemis this week. Have you seen those? They look like all of Earth is one community. We don't see the lines of division. Beautiful. Not like the worms like this. Okay, you can take it down. We all know what worms look like, perhaps. But as a faith that sees the importance and connection between all of the things that make up our world, we have to recognize, too, the reverence of the lowly earthworm. Which is interesting, right? Because when I look at the pictures from Artemis, I think about all of those humans, the ones that are fighting each other. I don't think about worms. Even though we humans need worms a lot more than they need us, our food systems would collapse without them. As much as industrial agriculture has tried to work around this, hasn't been done without cost. The food system is more fragile than it would be if we relied solely on the worm. But for worms, mostly I associate them with coming out of the pavement when it rained where I grew up. Does this happen here? I feel like I don't see them as much as I did when I was growing up. I remember accidentally stepping on them and flattening them. Were they okay? I didn't know. Yes, turns out, sir, because I was closer to the ground, Karen is telling me, because I used to be, even though I'm short, a lot shorter. Turns out worms can survive being severed, maybe not stepped on. When worms are severed, they don't become two worms, as maybe I'd been taught at one point. But the tail end of the worm does grow back eventually. Worms are resilient. It's a lot harder to get rid of them than you might imagine. But they don't survive most steps, and being on pavement in the dry air can kill them. They are, like us, resilient in surprising ways, yet fragile in others, like all life can be. Our reading by Danusia Lemaris, a poet I'd never heard of before I started my modest study on worms, speaks of her preconceptions of a worm's menial life, not realizing that they have taste buds all over their bodies, or perhaps more accurately, chemoreceptors, thank you. Sensory cells that detect chemical information in their food. She likens this to an ability to enjoy the very thing they were eating and helping to break down, to become something else. The work was enjoyable for them of eating these very things we throw away, a full body experience, right, of eating. Can you imagine? Yes. It's beyond what humans experience, though. Yet Lemaris pulls us into this idea of something almost transcendent, right, in that experience. A wild moment when a poem invites us to imagine being a worm. But she's not the only one who relates to worms. Charles Darwin studied worms extensively in his late life. He said, "It may be doubted whether there are as many animals which have played so important a part in the history of the world as have these lowly organized creatures." He was convinced that they showed signs of intelligence because they were making decisions, it appeared to him, deciding which way to pull a leaf down into their burrow for it to work just right. So I, too, have begun to relate a little bit to worms in this modest study. I learned that worms live multiple years Night crawlers, the kind I probably squished by accident walking around as a child, live up to 6 years, which makes me wonder what they do in those short lives and regret the ones that I've squished. And so I wonder if we can relate to worms. Who else might be able to relate to? Worms give us so much if we are rooted in fertile ground, as our gathering hymn tells us. Are we not rooted in the ground that worms have helped create? What does it say that we look at earthworms with such contempt and disgust? I'm viscerally grossed out when I see a picture of earthworms. In fact, I was doing some research for this sermon while eating, and I had to stop because the pictures were grossing me out. What is this about? I'm struck by the ways in which this disgust is used in our human world, right? To other people. To make people seem unworthy and unhuman. Calling political enemies vermin in a bid to tap into that disgust. Worms aren't that far off. And there's a theology behind this kind of disgust. In some parts of Christianity, there's an idea of the unclean. In the Bible, there are places where the worm is associated with death and humiliation. Jesus even quotes Psalm 22 when on the cross, "I am a worm, I am not a man." There's this idea that the worm is one of the lowest possible states. UU theology, however, is inherently different than this. One of our values is this interdependent connection of all things. We believe that the web that connects us is sacred, and that means that the beings that are part of the ecosystem are sacred. The worm, right, is an integral part of this. The poem speaks to this. Though the worm is shown enjoying and eating all these fruit scraps, she forgets for a moment that she too may be part of what the worm consumes. And yet, it is the worm and its friends, the bacteria, that make the fertile soil, the soil that grows the fruits and vegetables that make the food that we eat. It's a circle. It's what makes our world work. I find this to be a deeply theological point. We are intimately connected to the creatures that many of us find disgusting, that our politicians use to compare the lowest of life forms. We are intimately connected. That I would rather so intimately connected to this creature that I would rather stop thinking about than continue to eat while reading about. And while I'm thinking about the things that we are intimately connected with, but would rather not think about, there are other things we're intimately connected with that we'd rather not think about, but I can't stop thinking about. I, too, am aware of the moment we're living in today. And if you're anything like me, you spent Tuesday wondering if Trump's threats for a civilization to die were real or not. Well, missiles are sent and bombs dropped on people just like us and not like us, who are eating in cafes and taking their kids to school and just trying to get by in their own authoritarian regime. It goes without saying that no one deserves to live in that kind of terror. But we're living in a moment of existential fear for those who live across continents, but whose lives are intimately connected to our own. But listen to this. Did you know that they found similar worm species across all continents of the world? Helping to prove that the continents were once together as Pangea. This fact gives me some kind of comfort that the worms that wiggle and toil in the soil, helping us all to be fed, are like the worms in Iran, doing the same work. And that they are toiling the soil in the gardens and the farms of Iran. And the kids are stepping on the worms, wondering if they're squishing them too, marveling at them the way only kids can. The same way children do here. These worms in the farms and the gardens, they help people grow food despite destruction. We know that worms have outlasted all wars. The worms and their perseverance, their resilience in the face of our ignorance, they're a reminder of our own perseverance, our own resilience, that we are too are found on every continent, feeding people despite destruction. Somehow humans have outlasted all wars too. We have more in common with worms than I'd realized. I'm just like the poet imagining the taste buds that maybe aren't really taste buds. I'm just like Darwin, convinced that they have some kind of intelligence. They work in community, constantly transforming, creating, making something new out of death, making life out of death. This is our work too, to transform, to create, to work in community, to make something new out of death, to believe that life can conquer death, that there will be an end to wars and violence if only we work together in community. So are we going to refuse the logic that worms are inherently bad and unclean? To reject the idea that worms are lowly, to reject that comparing a human to them is dehumanizing? We talk about being brave like a lion, or wise like an owl, or free like a bird. But what about transforming like the worm? Resilient like the worm? Sacred like the worm? What would it mean to be able to look at what is dead like the worm and transform it into something new? As we live in this moment, it turns to us to make that change, to look at what is different, could be different, should be different. How do we make nourishment for the plants that are yet to grow? We can and we will. We will see the sacred in our living earth, in those who toil the earth, be they human or earthworm, and those across the continents like us and unlike us. May we remember our place and the worm's place in the holy circle of things. May it be so. Let us say together, Amen. Amen.